This is the first time you're able to recognize these Forrest Gump errors. The film Forrest Gump received 6 Academy Awards and generated $678 million in revenue. Audiences appreciated each frame. However, there was an underlying element within those frames that remained unaddressed. A genuine jet engine was utilized for the storm scene. Objects moved at velocities that could be lethal. Hanks needed to take action promptly before events escalated. Making a single mistake could result in dire consequences. Simultaneously, the production was making history. The individuals dispatched to Alabama were not the appropriate choice. Their information regarding JFK's schedule was inaccurate. Winston Groom, the author of the book, observed as Hollywood transformed his 6-week narrative into a version that was almost unrecognizable to him. It is unlikely that anyone would acknowledge the unpleasantness of the truth. In the mid-1980s, Winston Groom could not have anticipated that a Sunday lunch would alter the course of his life. However it occurred, his father recounted a chilling tale about a boy in the community who struggled with a mental illness. Other children would ridicule him, pursue him, and even hurl sticks in his direction. The experience was quite disappointing. To ensure her son's safety, the mother purchased a piano. Following a brief period, an extraordinary event occurred. Music began emanating from their residence. The child demonstrated exceptional intelligence. The children who bullied him were astonished. The unprofessional conduct has ceased. The groom will always remember that moment. Following that, he viewed a 60-minute program focused on idiot savants, and everything became clear. The inception of Forrest Gump occurred during his time confined in the slave quarters of a friend's estate in Point Clear, Alabama. Groom completed the book in a mere 6 weeks. He authored multiple books. He focused on enhancing his memory. Bringing Forrest Gump to the screen proved to be quite a challenging endeavor. A competitive bidding process occurred prior to the book's release. Warner Brothers successfully secured a victory and awarded Groom a sum of $500,000. Wendy Finerman and Steve Tisch were engaged to produce the show. The release of Rain Man marked a significant turning point. In Hollywood, a narrative about a prodigy had already emerged. Warner Brothers has terminated their association with Forrest. In 1990, it was placed in turnaround. Despite Eric Roth's revisions, Columbia ultimately rejected the narrative. Studio executives ridiculed it. One individual remarked, "It's merely a film about an eccentric man seated on a bench." It appeared to be lifeless. Directors continued to pass by. It was not Ivan Reitman. Penny Marshall and Terry Gilliam both declined. Progress resumed only after Sherry Lansing at Paramount reviewed Roth's version. Paramount acquired the rights in exchange for the story. To reach a conclusion, the concept was nearly successful. The book was presented as a gift from Groom to his childhood friends George Radcliffe and Jimbo Meter. This honor has become a source of difficulty. Radcliffe experienced a remarkable life. During his time in Mexico, he resided with Willie Nelson and socialized with John Wayne. The long-distance runner Meter, characterized by his beard, bore a striking resemblance to Forrest from the film, both in appearance and demeanor. Their voices influenced Forrest's manner of speaking. The film crew consulted with Meter to ensure the sound was accurate. However, following the film's lack of success, journalists started referring to them as the genuine Forrest Gump. That exacerbated the situation. The Grooms started to refute any influence they may have had. Despite the awareness among residents of Mobile, Alabama, he explicitly stated in 2019 that a genuine Forrest Gump does not exist. It appeared to enhance the situation, to ensure the confidentiality of his friends' secrets and avoid any legal complications. Robert Zemeckis, the director, faced significant challenges behind the scenes. In 1993, the visual effects utilized in Forrest Gump, which integrated Tom Hanks into historical footage, represented a groundbreaking achievement in the industry. However, Zemeckis developed a strong enthusiasm for it. He dedicated himself extensively and became immersed in his tasks. He did not celebrate upon the completion of the shoot. Rather, he descended into a period of depression that persisted for a year. His assertion that the movie was deep and heartbreaking was not due to its lack of commercial success. The event was successful, however. The experience, energy, and enthusiasm seemed to dissipate unexpectedly. He stated that it was as if a massive hive vanished without a trace overnight. He stated that many filmmakers continue to work relentlessly to avoid confronting the emotional downturn that often accompanies the profession. Forrest Gump had a significant impact beyond the realm of cinema. The director nearly experienced a mental breakdown during the process. Finding a suitable candidate for the lead role proved to be quite challenging. Tom Hanks was selected to portray Forrest, although he was not the initial choice. The role was initially extended to John Travolta. It was declined by Travolta. He ultimately chose to create Pulp Fiction instead. He successfully realigned his career due to that decision, yet it continued to linger in his thoughts. Forrest Gump achieved global earnings of $678 million. The film received 6 Academy Awards. The award for Best Actor was presented to Hanks. Travolta missed an opportunity to portray one of the most iconic roles in cinematic history. A significant number of individuals viewed these two films in 1994. Two paths diverged significantly due to a single decision. The decision to cast Sally Field sparked considerable discussion. She portrayed Forrest's mother, despite Tom Hanks being merely a decade her senior. They had previously been involved romantically in Punchline just a few years earlier. It was now her responsibility to assume the role of his mother. The age difference was unusual. The makeup artist put in significant effort to create a realistic appearance. The character transitioned from a young mother navigating life independently to an elderly woman facing the challenges of cancer in her final days. Hollywood rarely offers substantial roles to older women. The case involving Field highlighted the significant flaws within the system. A woman in her 40s can portray a love interest one year and a mother the following year. Subsequently, there was Robin Wright. Jenny fulfilled her role, a romantic interest for Forrest who faced challenges, yet her casting nearly fell through. Interpersonal relationships in the early 1990s presented significant challenges. The tabloids featured numerous stories regarding her relationship with Sean Penn. Studio executives expressed concern that the public would focus solely on the media coverage. Jenny was already a person who created challenges: substance misuse, self-harm, and emotional distress. There were concerns that Wright's personal life could negatively impact the perception of the role. Her experience was primarily in soap operas, which did not contribute positively to the situation. Robert Zemeckis was the one who advocated for her. He recognized a similarity in her suffering that mirrored Jenny's. He was correct. Wright delivered a compelling performance that established her as a formidable talent. She would assume leadership of House of Cards years later. This represented a significant risk in 1994. Gary Sinise faced his own challenges. He aspired to portray Vietnam veteran Lieutenant Dan who sustained injuries in combat. The casting directors determined that his striking appearance was not suitable for the portrayal of a character who had lost both limbs. That was the perspective held by traditional Hollywood during that era. Sinise put in considerable effort. He made several attempts. He executed a commendable gesture on their behalf. He possessed qualities that extended beyond mere physical appearance. He possessed significant influence. He promptly utilized the opportunity when he finally received the role. He received an Oscar nomination for his work. The narrative of Lieutenant Dan and the circumstances surrounding his injury. Individuals were significantly impacted by his anger and his process of healing. Sinise chose to dedicate his life to assisting soldiers due to his experiences. The Gary Sinise Foundation was established by him. The experience not only transformed his career, but it also provided him with a renewed sense of purpose. The actor portraying young Forrest also had a narrative to share. Michael Connor Humphreys did not receive formal training in acting. He was located at an educational institution designed for children facing learning challenges. Casting agents sought individuals who embodied authenticity. The discovery within him prompts contemplation of some challenging matters. Was Hollywood exploiting a child for the sake of realism? Humphreys portrayed a character with a disability. But it was more than that. He was experiencing it in various aspects. and the early scenes featuring Forrest frequently served to entertain audiences. That is an excessive load for a child to manage. The film gained widespread popularity globally. Unexpectedly, this young individual gained significant recognition. However, was he or his family aware of the long-term implications of that decision? Currently, discussions surrounding equitable hiring practices and inclusivity are more prevalent, a stark contrast to the situation in the early 1990s. Humphreys expressed his appreciation for the event. Nonetheless, the circumstances surrounding his discovery at a school for children with disabilities remain unsettling. When released in 1994, Forrest Gump achieved significant success, ranking as the fourth most successful film of the year. The project achieved over $100 million in revenue within 18 days, surpassed $200 million in 46 days, and reached $300 million in 193 days. A significant achievement in documentation. However, they engaged in additional activities behind the scenes. Paramount initiated budget reductions as soon as the funds were received, totaling $191 million by the conclusion of 1994. Initially, a distribution fee of 32% applies. That amounts to $61 million lost. A total of $73.5 million was allocated for advertising expenditures. The distribution will incur an additional cost of $62 million, and both Tom Hanks and director Robert Zemeckis will receive an extra $62 million as well. Finally, an additional $6 million in interest charges from St. Tordan was included. The total revenue generated by the movie was reported to be $191 million, whereas the production cost amounted to $253.5 million. An artificial defeat, or a match that was manipulated. Larry Gerbrandt, a specialist in the field, indicated that the reality was significantly more severe. He estimated that the film grossed approximately $350 million, and that was not even the most significant issue that occurred. Behind the film's compelling narrative and unprecedented box office success were shattered lives. Richard Blumstein was among the most unfortunate victims. His education at MIT enabled him to develop lip-sync technology in the 1980s, allowing actors' mouths to align with newly recorded speech. He stated that Forrest Gump employed his distinctive approach to engage Tom Hanks in conversations with JFK, Johnson, and Lennon. Blumstein stated that he never indicated it was acceptable. In 1995, he initiated legal action against Paramount Industrial Light and Magic. As a result of this matter, his decision to sue was not solely motivated by financial gain. It illustrated the tendency of Hollywood to replicate or appropriate the work of creators, subsequently pursuing legal action that incurs significant financial burdens for those creators. The case garnered significant attention within the visual effects industry. Suddenly, artists adopted a more protective stance. Concepts that were once openly exchanged among studios are now meticulously protected. Collaboration has been supplanted by apprehension. A significant impact had transformed the entire situation. Nevertheless, that was not the conclusion of the questionable activities. Globally, Forrest Gump generated nearly $348 million in revenue. The posters for that global sensation were visually appealing. The financial documentation was disorganized. Paramount oversaw the international release with the assistance of various subsidiaries. The country generated $50.4 million in revenue from the film. Japan generated $68 million. France and the UK collectively contributed an additional $51 million. However, the benefits were obscured by strategic agreements. In certain regions, distribution fees have increased to exceed 35%, exceeding the expectations for the organization. They successfully claimed deficits while discreetly receiving substantial sums from the additional fees. The strategy proved to be so effective that it was developed into a comprehensive guide. Today, major corporations employ comparable strategies that can make films generating $1 billion appear as though they have not yielded any profit. This results in reduced profits, diminished royalty payments, and numerous losses that may not accurately reflect the financial situation. While audiences were captivated by the appealing visuals on the big screen, there existed a significantly darker reality that remained unseen. Several impactful scenes were removed prior to the film's release. Certain scenes were omitted not due to their length, but rather because they were deemed too disturbing, political, or controversial to pass a Hollywood test screening. A scene featuring Martin Luther King Jr., His Selma March, was removed from the final cut. Forrest enters the protest under the impression that it is a parade. He observes police dogs growling and reflects on his own puppies. He concludes the standoff by tossing a stick. The dogs are pursuing it. Forrest expresses his apologies to MLK, stating that they were merely dogs. They lack an understanding of what is correct. Individuals responsible for civil rights express significant outrage. The scene rendered genuine pain almost absurd. It appeared to suggest that the innocence of a white individual could abruptly nullify the violence inflicted upon black individuals. Following considerable negative feedback, Zemeckis decided to abandon the entire project. A different scene that was removed was intended to be humorous, yet it resonated deeply. During his tenure as ambassador to China, Forrest engaged in a game of ping pong with George H.W. Bush. Forrest strikes Bush in the groin with the ball in a scene enhanced by computer-generated effects. The narrative was inspired by real events, yet it depicted a former president experiencing an unfortunate incident in a sensitive area. That situation posed significant risks. It was officially stated that it hindered the movie's progress. Bush privately desired its removal, though he did not express this publicly. Subsequently, there was Jenny. In the previous film, the nature of her illness remains ambiguous, though this was not always the case. The initial versions provided a clear understanding of AIDS. A letter informed her of the issue at hand. The two individuals engaged in a discussion regarding the matter. All elements align: her perilous lifestyle, her passing in 1982, and the widespread apprehension regarding AIDS during that era. Nonetheless, Zemeckis distanced himself. They preferred to avoid any unnecessary commotion. Their intention was to avoid a dispute regarding the PG-13 rating, and they aimed to prevent Jenny's narrative from being framed as a story about illness. The final form remained unclear and indistinct. In the subsequent book, it was stated that she had succumbed to hepatitis C. That was an improvement. The scenes depicting her childhood were notably more somber. The film suggests instances of abuse, yet test audiences perceived significantly more. The aggression exhibited by her father resulted in her experiencing pain. The challenging upbringing that shaped her into the person she is today. Those scenes instilled a desire for self-harm in her future. There are individuals who speculate that Forrest may have caused harm to her father, or possibly removed him from the situation. Ultimately, Forrest confronts those who have caused harm to Jenny. He strikes her boyfriend. He encourages individuals at her performances. A member of the Black Panther organization is struck by him for raising her voice at him. Is it possible that he could have advanced even more? We are currently uncertain. However, those cutscenes contributed to a notably somber narrative for her character. It appears to be excessively severe. The company implemented a reduction. They aimed to prevent compassion from evolving into fear. The film also engaged with historical elements, at times altering them significantly. The scene in the film where Forrest witnesses the integration of the University of Alabama. Members of the 82nd Airborne are seen alongside students as they proceed past Governor George Wallace. That did not occur. The presence of the Alabama National Guard added to the event, yet the paratroopers enhanced the excitement significantly. The impact of films on historical events is significant. The situation deteriorated as they mismanaged the timing. Forrest is selected for the All-America team and has an encounter with JFK following the scene involving the African-American individuals. In reality, JFK was assassinated prior to the announcement of the All-America team. It was not feasible. However, it aligned with the narrative, leading to alterations in the facts. The omission of certain scenes negatively impacted the overall quality. They presented Forrest alongside additional leaders and altered history to a greater extent. What seems to be the issue? A significant number of individuals held this belief. Individuals believed it to be entirely authentic. Historians issued a cautionary note. The film was noted for its seamless blending of fact and fantasy, potentially altering the way audiences recall events. The film Forrest Gump is appreciated by many for its emotional depth, charm, and innovative effects that were groundbreaking for its era. Despite the film's positive conclusion and multiple Oscar wins, it contains numerous errors, unusual transitions, and significant safety concerns. The digital removal of Lieutenant Dan's legs was one of the most remarkable aspects of the film. The blue stockings worn by Gary Sinise on set required meticulous removal, frame by frame, by the special effects teams at Industrial Light and Magic. In 1994, it was a significant event, although the outcomes were not flawless. In certain shots, his actual legs remain visible. Lieutenant Dan demonstrates the use of prosthetic legs when he falls from his wheelchair and subsequently pulls himself back up. Sinise's actual leg becomes visible as he raises his voice at the women and expels them from his room. These were not merely minor issues. For each frame, artists were required to digitally paint over the backgrounds, shadows, and lighting. Despite the diligent efforts of the team, a few errors were still overlooked. The shrimp boat scene is among the most significant moments in the film. Forrest and Lieutenant Dan Hall successfully harvested an impressive quantity of shrimp, 6,125 pounds. The Bubba Gump Shrimp Company is established due to the substantial catch. However, the film fails to indicate that all of the shrimp sourced from Gay Fish Company were pre-cooked and devoid of heads. Paramount paid approximately $26,140, translating to about $295 to $3 per pound, for shrimp that had been cleaned and refrigerated for an extended period prior to being caught. Wild-caught shrimp are typically harvested with their heads intact. The event occurs subsequently on the boat. That is the reason you observe shrimp emerging from wooded areas. It is a type of food typically available at retail outlets. In an unexpected turn of events, Gay Fish Company had been engaged in the legitimate fishing of real shrimp in that region for 75 years. Yet the filmmakers opted for a simulated approach. The iconic bench featured in the film also generated considerable controversy. In order to accommodate Tom Hanks, 3 matching chairs were constructed, in addition to 2 extra chairs intended for background use. Nevertheless, they continued to be taken. During breaks, the fans would remove the chairs, necessitating the crew to continually replace them. Ultimately, Paramount produced an additional 10 to present to the cast and crew as tokens of appreciation. There was an issue with continuity. Scenes occasionally transitioned between various iterations of the bench, as each one exhibited subtle differences. One of the original benches was relocated to the residence of designer Rick Carter, where it withstood a significant fire in 2025, despite being severely burned and damaged. Some individuals continue to visit Savannah, Georgia, in hopes of encountering the original bench, although it was never intended to remain in that location. The actual props are no longer present. Some of the issues occurring behind the scenes were significant. The storm scene nearly devolved into a significant disruption. The team established a jet engine at Port Royal's shipping port to create the illusion of Hurricane Carmen occurring. It was designed to effectively circulate wind and water across the set, but it performed its functions excessively. The pressure became overwhelming. Objects moved at perilous velocities. Subsequently, Tom Hanks remarked that it was the most perilous experience he had ever encountered on set. The strong winds posed a significant risk, where a single misstep could have resulted in serious injury or even fatality. He needed to move swiftly to stay ahead of objects being propelled through the air by powerful gusts of wind. Every aspect needed to be meticulously timed to the second. All of this was accomplished prior to the era when scenes like these could be swiftly substituted with computer-generated effects. To achieve realism, they jeopardized lives. There are additional issues beyond just the bugs. The portrayal of events and individuals in the movie is notably disappointing. Examine the scene featuring Black Panther. It depicts Forrest becoming disoriented amidst a tumultuous and heated political assembly. The individuals are attired in leather garments. They express their frustration vocally and gesture emphatically. Elaine Brown, a former leader of the Black Panthers, stated that the scene was entirely fabricated. The assertion that the group was a cult harboring animosity towards white individuals is entirely unfounded. The original Black Panthers were dedicated to civil rights, community food programs, and educational initiatives. In many instances, their attire during meetings did not reflect that standard. However, for countless moviegoers, that singular scene represented their entire understanding of the group, and it was inaccurate. It conveys an unusual implication regarding the intelligence of individuals. Despite his limited understanding of the circumstances surrounding him, Forrest is depicted as kind, fortunate, and remarkably successful. Many intelligent individuals argue that this is a negative implication, as it suggests that high intelligence may correlate with lower moral standards or goodness. Individuals struggle in the presence of Forrest, not due to his knowledge, but because he refrains from questioning anything. The film overlooks genuine horrors such as racism, war, and abuse, presenting them through a lens of confusion. Some individuals argue that this diminishes significant historical events to mere background noise and discourages critical thinking. Jen's narrative represents one of the most challenging aspects. A childhood friend of Forrest's experiences prolonged sexual abuse, yet the film does not delve deeply into this topic. Forrest's statement regarding her father's affection and frequent kisses indicates a lack of understanding of the situation, yet the film allows this characterization to remain unchallenged. Mental health experts indicate that this approach diminishes the fear associated with her trauma. Jenny's subsequent challenges with substance abuse, risky relationships, and her involvement in activism are depicted as quite similar. Her death, attributed by many to AIDS, is perceived as the inevitable conclusion of a challenging life, leading to the impression that she bore responsibility for it. Professionals indicate that this representation perpetuates detrimental perceptions of individuals who have experienced abuse and may discourage actual victims from seeking assistance. Certain veterans organizations have expressed criticism regarding the film and its depiction of Vietnam. It received favorable evaluations for its accuracy regarding the war, however, it fails to address the subsequent events. Post-traumatic stress disorder is often not discussed openly. The film fails to depict the profound sadness, homelessness, substance abuse, and suicides experienced by countless service members. In reality, numerous soldiers did not exhibit symptoms of PTSD until after the government's one-year deadline for compensation had elapsed, resulting in a lack of support for them. In the film, Forrest seamlessly reintegrates upon his return home. Individuals regard him as a hero. The absence of indications regarding protests, racism, or the hardships experienced by the majority of soldiers is notable. Individuals who view this sanitized portrayal of war may experience a sense of satisfaction, yet it conceals the genuine suffering that occurred historically. Lastly, there is Bubba, an individual of African descent who aspires to establish his own shrimp business. His role in the narrative primarily serves to assist Forrest in achieving wealth. Vietnam is the location of his demise. Forrest subsequently establishes a shrimp business bearing his name. Bubba's aspirations remain unfulfilled. He has limited dialogue apart from discussions about shrimp. Some individuals hold a negative view of him, perceiving him as a stereotypical character who lacks personal ambitions and exists solely to support a white protagonist in achieving success. If Forrest achieves wealth, Bubba will likely be forgotten. The film presents the notion that both individuals had equal opportunities, yet that was not the reality of the situation. Forrest secures a grant that would have been unattainable for Bubba, along with business opportunities that were not feasible for a black man in the South during the 1960s. Ultimately, Forrest profits from Bubba's idea, while Bubba's family receives only a check. The film fails to address the issue of racial inequality that exists in reality. Forrest Gump transcended its status as a mere box office success. It emerged as one of the most discussed films within American academic circles. On college campuses, there was significant contention regarding the appropriateness of screening the movie in history or film classes. Many educational institutions have opted to eliminate it entirely. Certain individuals have claimed that it distorts historical facts. Critics noted that the film failed to accurately depict the severe realities of Jim Crow racism in the South. Although Forrest resides in Alabama during that period, the film largely avoids addressing the topic. Conversely, it portrays the South as sweet and innocent, a phenomenon referred to by scholars as fake hollow nostalgia. The film's conservative theme became increasingly evident as its audience grew. It provided characters with rewards for adhering to the rules and imposed penalties for violations. Rolling Stone provided a negative review. It is suggested that Forrest maintains his survival by adhering to instructions, whereas those who challenge the status quo or engage in critical thinking face dire consequences such as illness or physical loss. For many, that was not merely poor storytelling, it represented a form of harmful propaganda disguised as a positive narrative. Beyond the borders of the United States, there was an even greater level of scrutiny. Critics from various nations expressed that the film endorsed American cultural imperialism. Critics have argued that Forrest Gump presents U.S. military actions in a favorable light, overlooking the negative consequences experienced by other nations. The film illustrated the capacity of Hollywood to disseminate American ideals globally, regardless of whether those values are rooted in violence or deception. The film subtly encouraged viewers to comply without hesitation. Adhering to the provided guidance will lead to a successful outcome. The message caused significant distress among audiences in other countries, leading some film events to decide against screening the movie entirely. They preferred not to reveal what they perceived as soft power rhetoric. Following a period of time, the Nazi Me Too movement elicited a fresh wave of criticism. Individuals began to revisit scenes that had previously gone unnoticed. Jenny and Forrest found themselves in one of the most distressing situations. Jenny initiates the intimate encounter despite Forrest's clear lack of understanding regarding the situation. Some individuals have argued that Forrest was unable to provide informed consent due to his intellectual disability. Some individuals remarked that it was akin to enjoying time with a child. In 1994, had the roles been reversed and a male touched a disabled female, it is likely that there would have been immediate outrage. Forrest's mother was engaged in another distressing incident. In the film, she engages in a relationship with the school's director to secure Forrest's admission into a conventional school. This was initially intended as comedic, yet contemporary audiences perceive a significantly more somber undertone. A man in a position of authority coerces a vulnerable mother into a sexual encounter. Currently, critics are asserting that this constitutes rape. The scenes illustrated how the film normalized pressure, particularly for individuals lacking significant power or knowledge. During the 1990s, it highlighted the minimal regard Hollywood had for consent. Individuals working with persons with disabilities encountered numerous challenges related to Forrest Gump. It has been observed that individuals with disabilities are often perceived in two distinct manners, either as objects of pity or as sources of extraordinary motivation. There are opinions suggesting that the role should have been awarded to an individual with a genuine cognitive disability, despite Tom Hanks receiving the Oscar. Currently, casting an actor without a disability for that role may lead to significant complications. Individuals working with disabled persons indicated that Forrest's narrative suggested that disabled individuals merely need to exert more effort. However, they actually encounter significant systemic obstacles. The film's optimistic message overlooked the issues of abuse, insufficient support, and the challenges that many individuals with disabilities encounter on a daily basis. However, that was not the conclusion of the damage. Following the release of the film, certain legislators began to leverage Forrest's narrative as a means to advocate for reduced spending. It was suggested that his success, despite having a disability, indicated that special education programs may not be necessary. If Forrest is capable of succeeding independently, then what justifies government funding for additional support? It was an unkind approach to comprehend fantasy. Forrest's mother makes significant efforts to ensure he does not attend a special school, and the film portrays this decision as commendable. In reality, specialized education does not fall short. It is a life-saving measure. Individuals dedicated to enhancing education needed to emphasize to lawmakers that Forrest Gump is a fictional narrative and not a suitable framework for policy making. Nevertheless, the film evoked strong emotions in those seeking to reduce expenses. Subsequently, the following narrative was released. This section is unclear and somewhat unusual. There were claims that the studio intended to produce a sequel to capitalize on the events of 9/11. The statement was inaccurate. Author Eric Roth submitted the story for the second movie on September 10, 2001, just one day prior to the attacks. Following the initial film, Forrest would be seen waiting at a bus stop for his son in the sequel. It contained some unconventional ideas. Forrest's involvement with the O.J. involvement in the Simpson car chase, engaging in dance with Princess Diana, and witnessing the Oklahoma City bombing. He was also going to be diagnosed with AIDS alongside his son. Subsequent to September 11th, significant changes occurred. Robert Zemeckis, Roth, and Tom Hanks convened for a meeting. Both parties concurred that a lighthearted Forrest Gump film was unlikely to materialize. Changes had occurred. Individuals were experiencing discomfort. The entire concept was discarded due to a lack of alignment with the envisioned outcome. No complaints were raised that hindered its progress. The studio has not ceased operations. The directors made the decision to depart, believing that certain matters are best left untouched.